What is the process of growing rice?
Okay, and when April rolls around and this ground dries up, you can see the water out there right now and the geese coming in and out. There's not much we can do, you know, we just leave it here until it dries up. And as soon as it dries up, we'll get the tractors in here, pulling tillage equipment to work up that soil real good, kind of like you might do in your garden at home, just to get a good seed bed. Then we'll apply some fertilizer, and then we'll flood it again. We'll flood it to a depth of maybe 3 or 4 inches, and then make the phone call to the airplane. Airplane picks up the seed, and this airplane will fly the seed onto the field for us, into the water. At that point, we're just watching the water levels, watching for weeds. Weeds come, we gotta spray for the weeds. Call the airplane again, and he sprays the weeds for us. And we just watch the growth. And if we get into late June, early July, when the rice is maybe 60 days old, 2 months old, we'll look at it, and sometimes we'll take a tissue sample. We'll take some leaves off the rice plants and have them analyzed at a lab, and they will tell us if we're high or low on nitrogen, if we should add some or not worry about it. And we'll make another decision there whether to call the airplane for what we call a top dressing of fertilizer. So we may do that, we may not. And that gets us into the months of July and August, and at that point we're holding the deeper water because rice needs warmth. And sometimes when you get into August, you probably don't know it, and you probably like it when it does happen, the nights will cool off. It'll get maybe down to 50, 55 degrees at night. Rice doesn't like that. What can happen if you get too many nights in a row like that, that rice will sterilize. The plant will sterilize, the pollen will die, and the plant won't pollinate. And that happens, we got no crop. There's nothing growing. Okay, the plant will just stay green, it won't produce any grain. Okay, once we dodge that bullet, and back to the high water. What the high water does is it'll insulate that rice plant. The water temperature will stay, maybe 60, 65 degrees, in that range. And if we can get that water level up and protect that plant, it'll stay at 60, 65 degrees, and the cold night won't bother it. That's the goal there. Most of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't. We got issues in some of these fields where we lose the water for, it's usually my fault. Yeah, it's usually human error which will do that to you. Okay, that'll get us to September, and in September that rice starts maturing, and once the rice plant grows up, gosh, I wish maybe I could find an example for you. But anyway, the grain is at the top of the plant, and it'll just start tipping when the grain gets full. It'll cause the plant to tip over like that. You've probably seen that on television, and you know, around different kinds of plants will do that. And we'll just wait for that plant to mature, and then we'll drain the water. Okay, this field in particular, and most fields, it takes about a month, maybe up to 6 weeks, depending on your field, to dry it out. So you got to get the ground dry so we can bring the big machines in there to harvest it. Can't harvest it in the mud, it just makes a mess. Just a complete mess. Rice can grow much like you see corn or tomatoes. You could water it once a week. However, our problem is weeds. We use that water for weed control. See, if you get that much water in your field, weeds can't grow through that, where rice can. So it's a relatively cheap and very efficient way of controlling weeds. Because we'll get weed populations in these fields sometimes that are just so thick we can't even harvest it. It takes the crop completely out of the question. We have no crop.
How do you drain the field?
How do we drain the field? What it is, in each field, you have a structure just like this. Just imagine that this is a rice field full of water. And what you do, you just come along and you pull boards. And that lets the water out. Okay, and you can pull all the boards to let all the water out, or however many boards you want to pull to the depth you desire. Pretty simple. And all you really got to remember is water runs downhill. And put the boards in for the depth you desire. So if you look right here, we have these things about every 200 feet across the field. It's same kind of principle here. What you do is you just put one of these boards in the box, and that to regulate the water depth there, and let however much you want to spill into there. That's how we control the water. If we want 4 inches of water in here, we put a 4-inch board in there. 6 inches, 6 and on up, if you understand that. Okay, well, why we do that is this is the top end of the field, and way down there, almost to where those power poles are, is the bottom end. And the field is sloped, so we can drain it, okay? Now, if we didn't have these levees every 200 feet, all that water would go to the bottom end of the field. Down there, we might have 2 feet of water that the rice can't grow through. Up here, we'd have no water, and somewhere in the middle is where we'd want the water. So we make these levees across here to help us balance that water. So if you can imagine, it's just kind of stair steps down. All the water is the same depth all the way across for almost a mile. Here. And what we did after the harvest is we came through with a big mower and we mowed the rice straw down. It's really not a good example of what the rice straw might look like, but anyway, what happens after the harvest is we cut the rice at it's about that high off the ground, and it out of the back of the machine is a lot of straw, and it sits there in the field. And we used to be able to burn that, and then air quality issues forced us out of the burning, so we've had to develop different ways of getting rid of that straw. The important part really is to be able to get in here with a plow and turn it under, because I think when that straw, you can see some of the straw still here, makes contact with the soil and you get a little water on it, the biodegradation is rapid, and if everything works fine, it's a good winter, and we can add water here through the river system, which I'll tell you about the water source here in a moment. That always helps, but you got to have that soil straw mix in order for it to mostly nitrogen. Lots of nitrogen is added. Before we plant the crop, anywhere from 150 to 200 pounds to the acre. And then, as I mentioned before, the top dressing, the mid-season application, again, that's probably about 150 pounds to the acre. So close to 300 pounds to the acre annually of nitrogen alone. Phosphorus, yeah, sometimes we add that, sometimes potassium. Often, especially if we're going to farm a field that we've never farmed before, we'll take a soil sample. We'll just come out here in the middle of the field, take a shovel full of dirt, put it in a container, take it to the lab, and they'll tell us what that soil needs. There's a lot of micronutrients, potassium, magnesium, silicone, other things that the rice likes, and sometimes you just ignore those because they can be a little bit more expensive to add, but we will do it if it's real deficient.
Snow geese play a big factor in rice propagation. Not only do the geese fertilize the soil with their feces, they also help with mixing the straw back into the soil by walking around and living there. Wind can play a big role in rice propagation. Because of the long, narrow fields, wind can move all of the water from the north end to the south end. leaving the north area showing rice but 6 inches of water on the south area. Temperature is a very important factor of rice propagation. Rice does not like to grow in cold weather, so if a cold storm is coming in, the water is drained from the rice fields, ensuring the rice to grow.